I'm Mario Martinez Jr., CEO and founder of Ingresso, and we are the creators of flymessage.io, the free personal writing assistant and text expander application. On each episode of this podcast, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you grow your sales numbers at scale. So, get your pen and paper or iPad and keyboard and start taking notes as you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast, and I am pumped to be here today with you guys. We're going to be spending some time talking about seed and soil. What the heck? Seed and soil, what are we talking about? We're talking about people, process, systems, tools, and I'm going to be here with none other than my boy, Stephen Oommen. He is formerly the Vice President of Enterprise Sales at Outreach. You know who Outreach is. Yes, that's right. And he's got a rich history of selling into the enterprise. Stephen, man, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me, man. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. We've obviously been connected to each other and known each other for a long time. And soon enough, we'll be having you sign on as one of our strategic advisors and Fly ambassadors as well. So as we started talking about what we're doing with Fly Message and where we're going, and it just made a perfect fit, man, to be able to spend some time talking about something that both of us love and that all my listeners love as well: sales, marketing, people, process, systems. So do me a favor, give a little background about yourself. I mentioned you were formerly with Outreach. What are you doing? What are you going to be doing in the future? And also tell a little bit of background about yourself. And then I got a very special question I want to ask you.
I appreciate it. Man, it's crazy to think, because I've been on this journey this past few months, just thinking about the past, where I've been, where I'm going. And I realized this is my 25th year in sales. I started very young, and I've sold everything you can possibly imagine. I think it's comical because sometimes I ask people, what's the craziest thing you've sold? And I think about everything I've sold, from knives to cell phones to software to everything. Was most recently at Outreach. Before that was at Microsoft, did a stint at ADP. So you think about, I've been a lot of different places, the Citibanks, the Fidelities, you name it. So across a variety of industries. But man, selling is in my blood, and I love what I do. And as far as what I'm going to be doing in the future, that is the benefit of having 25 years of doing this, is for the first time, I get to just chill and figure that out. And it's a wonderful place to be. And I've got 2 young kids and a wife, and it is family time. And they are excited to have dad home and not in the office or on the road. So I am excited to be a family man for at least a few months until I figure out what my next venture is. But I'm excited, man.
And hey, you get to help great startups like us with Fly Message build things out, give us advice. I don't claim to know everything, although I think I know a lot, but I don't know everything. So that having been said, we get that experience. But one of the things that you have a ton of experience around is into the enterprise selling, globals accounts, nationals, the super large accounts. We haven't had a lot of that on the show. And so I'm looking forward to hearing some of this advice that you're going to be giving as well. But as with everyone who joins my show, I always ask this question, and that is, tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they're looking at any or all of your social profiles. And dude, I'm looking for something juicy. Just don't confess any sins.
I'll tell you something that I think only very few people know about me, but they would not know about it if they just looked at my profile online. Because not everything is as it seems. But in 2008, right as the recession was starting, I got hit just like everyone else, lost everything. So there was a time I was living out of my car, showering out of 24-hour fitness, and building a company from scratch. So I know the pains and the hard knocks. My family didn't even know it at the time. But hey, thank goodness for 24-hour fitness, because literally otherwise I wouldn't have soap and running water at the time. But it was a very interesting time, and glad I'm on the other side of it.
Wow, that's interesting. No, I did not know that about you, and I've never seen you talk about that or seen it in writing or heard you talk about that. I'm curious. So you started building a company during that time, and you were living out of your car. You obviously were able to pay for the 24-hour fitness membership. Maybe you were on one of those lifetime plans that I got when I was like 20 years old, and it was like $2 a month or something like that.
That's actually exactly the truth, like to a T. That's exactly what it was.
So what happened? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I thought I was a smart young seller in 2000. At the end of 2007, I was at Citibank. I was a President's Club winner. Thought I could go start my own mortgage company because, you know, like a lot of people, everybody was making money. You can do this on your own. And guess what happened at the end of 2007? Everything crashed, right? So you learn a very humbling lesson that knowledge is power. Everything doesn't last forever. So that's how I got into that situation, is with starting a mortgage company and just, you know, again, losing everything. That mortgage company went under. And then I got more into the investment side, and that's how I pulled myself out of it, found financial partners, different things of that nature. And real estate was cheap back then.
Gotcha. All right. Well, good, man. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. And how long was it before you recovered? I'm curious.
Ooh, that probably took me a good year and a half to, I would say, even recover. To get to a place of, I would say, stability, probably 6 to 7 months.
Wow. And how long were you living out of the car for?
It was only a couple weeks. Then I found friends, and you had the couches, you know, you did all that kind of stuff. I had a really good friend that let me just use one of his bedrooms for a while, and, you know, slowly but surely was able to claw my way out of it. So
Yeah. Good. Well, we always need those types of friends that are there when you're like, dude, I'm at my lowest of low, and they're like, come on in, let me help you. Let let me see what you can do. And that shows a testimony to great friendships as well, right?
100%.
Well, good. Well, let's transition into what we want to spend some time talking about, and that is, you know, really when sales leaders come in, one of the things that you have had some experience in, I know I personally have as well. We come into a sales organization, we're brand spanking new, and really the way I look at it is, when I come into an organization, there's three possibilities of what that organization looks like. It's either, number one, they're flat and they need to grow. Number two, they're underperforming and they need to grow. Or number three, there's no organization and you're building it from scratch and they need to grow.
Are you telling me that everybody needs to grow? What?
That's exactly what I'm telling you, is that's the mission, that's the goal. And those are really the three possibilities that a sales leader is coming in from, and the mindset that they're in. So, you know, let's talk about something that you talk about. I heard you once before inside of our pregame show and in conversation about seed and soil. And it's kind of an interesting analogy, if you would, to talk about seed and soil and what that means. So let's first talk about seed and soil, and then we're going to tie that back into, like, as a sales leader, you're coming into one of those three scenarios that I just described. And how do we do that? So first, seed and soil, what the heck is that?
Yeah. So the way that I define it, and, you know, I've never heard anyone really talk about this personally, but then again, we live in a world, and who knows if somebody's informed my thoughts on this. I just honestly don't know. So if someone else talks about this and I don't give you credit, forgive me. But the way that I define it is, I think of seed as your people, right? Your talent. We hear so much in the world of go to market and sales, like, we need great talent. We need the best sellers. And there's this war on talent, right? So ultimately, to me, seed is, who are your people? And it's not just in go to market, it's across your entire organization. Well, when we think about the organization, that to me is what the soil is, right? It's, where are we planting our people? And so we have to fundamentally look at both scenarios and ask ourselves, do we have great seed? Do we have great soil? And usually there's a hybrid of both, because you want to understand which you should attack, which is a priority, where, if you have a flat company, if you have a behind the number company, all of those things, that's what you're really focused on. Is, I need better people, I need better processes, I need a better infrastructure. You're always thinking about what you can tweak and what you can change, and sometimes completely innovate to get the results that you want.
I'll tell you a story. I came in as a VP of sales to an organization, it was scenario number 2, underperforming and needed to grow. And I came in, and my first week on the job, I asked everybody to, or actually my boss, the head of sales, asked everybody to be in the office so that I can meet everybody for the first day, because everybody lived in different parts of California. So everybody kind of, flew in. That was great. And my first week, I started, just wanting to know, like, what's working, what's not working, how's everything going? Tell me about process, systems, tools, what's preventing you from having success, right? I want to hear from people. What do you think is preventing you from having success? Again, underperforming, needed to grow. And we're talking about underperforming by 59% of plan. That's where they were, right? It was really bad, right? So one of the first things that I figured out was, I think we've got an attitude mindset problem going on right here in the team. And it wasn't hard to figure that out literally within the first 2 days. And, rule of thumb when you come in as a sales leader is don't try to make change for at least that first 30 days, right? Like you don't want to try to make change. And preferably 90. You get yourself that 90-day roadmap to be able to really get yourself ingrained. And I'm a big believer in that. However, I could tell that right out of the gate, it was, attitude. It was like, they had changed VPs in the organization like we change underwear, right? Literally, I was the 5th one in like 3 years. So one of the things I figured out was, okay, maybe I have an attitude problem. Anyways, ended that first day, I said, all right, everyone, hey, it's great to meet you. Here's what I'd like to see us do. It's a Monday today, right? I'd like everybody to try to be back in the office. Let's be back as a group here Wednesday and Thursday, or we could do Tuesday and Wednesday. What would you like to do? Then I had one guy that raised his hand and says, oh, no, I don't come into the office. Around the table, and I said, oh, you don't? Well, when do you work? Well, I work exclusively from home. That's what he said. And I said, oh, sounds great. And I said, all right, well, I'm asking you to come into the office. Are you willing to come to the office? He's like, no, listen, I want to make sure we set the boundaries correctly right from the get-go. And I was like, oh, you do? Got it. Interesting. All right. So I let that one go inside the meeting. And I said, well, how about for everyone else? Are you willing to be here? Of course, everybody else says, yeah, absolutely. We're willing to be here. And then right after that meeting, I called the director and his boss into my office. And I said, all right, so tell me about John Smith. And so he says, well, I think, he was promised when he first came on that, in his work contract that he was, going to be able to work remote. He didn't have to commute. That's what he was told. And I said, that's fine. I said, I'm not asking anybody to commute here 3 times a week. I'm just asking, can you be in the office this week? Because I want to get to know the team, understand your accounts, what's going on. And he goes, yeah, I think he's just trying to, set that up front. And I was like, fair. How do you feel about it, director? And he was like, well, it's probably the bad timing. He should have done it. But I do understand the point that he's trying to make. I said, really? You do? So I said, so do you know, is this in his contract? And he's like, well, actually, I don't know. This is what he told me. And I said, and you never bothered to look. So when you have a team meeting, what happens? He's like, well, everybody shows up except for him and he's remote. And I was like, really? And you were okay with that? He was like, yeah. And he was like, did you ask for more? He's like, no, because he told me the same thing. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I said, is there anything that prevents him from coming? Because he had like sick wife, children, mom, something like that. He said, not that I know of. I said, have you ever asked? He's like, yeah, we talk about his family all the time. I said, okay, so there's nothing that is like, impeding him that you know of, right? He said, no. I said, okay. All right, so well, we're going to call him in the office before at least. Call him on in. I say, hey, I'm curious. Like, bro, I asked you to come in just for a couple days this week. What's the story? He gives me the same spiel he gave in front of everybody else. And I said, I'm curious. Is there anything that's preventing you from coming? Meaning, like, there may be a reason. Maybe you have a sick parent, a child, something like that. And I don't want you to get into details, but just tell me that there's something personally that is preventing you from doing this. And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay. And he was like, I was told this was in my contract. I said, okay, I'll take a look at that. And so now we're having a battle here. You see this is unfolding and he's not getting it. And so as you start questioning, you would get on the other side. I mean, if I was talking to you and I was saying this to you and I'm your boss, whatever level it is, I'm your boss's boss, your boss's boss's boss, right? At some point it would click in your brain like, I better throttle it down. At some point it's going to click, which clearly indicates that we have a seed problem. I think to the point you were talking about with person. Nonetheless, He leaves, call up HR and said, first day on the job, I need to know, is this in his contract? They're like, already? And I'm like, first day. I'm not kidding you not. So I call up my boss, the head of sales, and I was like, hey, man. I was like, this is what happened. He said, what? And I said, yeah. And he's like, that's outrageous. He said, fire him. And I said, well, slow our roll. Like, we don't want to do that yet. And I said, I want to kind of peel this onion back and see if I can coach him through this. And he's like, okay. So long story short, pull the contract, nothing in the contract. In fact, the contract says, his employment agreement, that his office is in San Francisco, even though he lives in Rancho Cordova. So now that's an interesting one. So I say to HR, I said, so to be honest, correct me if I'm wrong, I could, in theory, say you're in the office 5 days a week. They're like, yes, you could. I said, okay, I just want to make sure. So I have a virtual meeting with him, and my virtual meeting is to say, I need to see you on Monday next week inside the office. And then he reminds me that he doesn't come into the office, but maybe he'll do it once a month. And I said, no, you will come into the office because I'm asking you to come into the office. And he's like, are you mandating? I said, if that's the way it has to be, then yes, I'm mandating. Well, he decided not to show up on that Monday. And the very next day, 1 week later, I terminated him. So we wonder why organizations have these problems. And oftentimes it stems, in my opinion, from seed, but definitely from soil. What are your thoughts on that story?
Okay, so are we okay with a little bit of challenging here?
Sure, absolutely.
Will make for a great conversation. So in my earlier part of my career, and still today, I am a big believer that talent rules all, because I've seen it over and over again where I will switch out a seller into a territory that was underperforming, where the previous seller would be like, hey, this is a bad territory, or this, like every excuse. All of a sudden you switch out the seller and things turn around, right? Now, I am very much also a believer, based on somebody's circumstance, whoever's listening, you know your circumstance within your company and where you need to focus more on, in a hybrid approach. What do I mean by that? Because when I look at the seed versus soil, we learn a lot from the analogy. How often does a farmer, and that's the secret to all of this that I kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit early, is there's a third player here, which is the farmer, right? But how often do we go out and sit there and scream and yell at a seed, grow, do something faster. Like, why are you not producing fruit? Why are you not, like, we don't yell at the seed ever. Now, are there sometimes like dormant seeds, bad seed? Absolutely. That is possible. But more often than not, what it is it's not fertile soil, or it's not the right soil, right? Because you don't plant a cactus in the jungle. You don't plant an oak tree in the desert. That would just be ludicrous, right? So I think there is absolutely a place for something really is a dormant seed, but it is up to the farmer to create the environment. And where I think there's a lot of issues in corporate and a lot of sales teams is the farmers have not been trained for the crop they're trying to yield. You're trying to put a carrot farmer and try to have them grow apple trees. They're very different ways. Like, I don't know anything about agriculture, so whoever's listening, you're probably thinking, what is this guy talking about, right? But here's my point to your story. I would also think about this question that I've asked myself over the years, over and over and over again. If you want the best seed, so in this scenario called the best sellers, ask ourselves this question is go-to-market leaders. What about our company, our soil, would attract the best sellers to plant their roots here? And so it's a very wise question we should be asking ourselves, because if you were really one of the top sellers out there, why would you leave where you're at? So there has to be something attractive to get them to come. And so in the scenario that I was thinking about as you were sharing that story, I would just ask myself the question, because the final verdict might have been correct. And maybe you already did this. So this is the part where I would challenge is, was there a process to say, why do we want people coming into the office? There's got to be a business outcome. And what about coming into the office is so attractive to a seller that the person that's not coming in is losing out on something that would help them be more productive as a seller? Almost like that fear of missing out. Like there's something that everyone else is getting that is provable, that by coming to the office, they're more productive, they're making more commissions, whatever it is, customers like them better, all that kind of stuff. So it's just one caveat to the story that likely wasn't shared, but that's the way that I would think about, and that would be my response to that.
Yeah, 100%. And to be very frank, the culture of the organization was to have people come in the office 5 days a week, right? Now, whether or not that made a difference, I don't think it did. My mission was, in this particular story, was not about you being in the office to be able to work. It was, hey, this is my first week on the job. I want to get to know you, and I want to understand what's going on with you. I want to be able to understand process, systems, tools, accounts, strategy, those types of things. And from the perspective of this element, again, walking in as a leader, when you assess, when you walk in, you have one of those three scenarios I mentioned. You're static and you need to grow. It's underperforming and you need to grow, or it's brand new and you need to grow, right? And so in this case, it was underperforming and needed to grow by 40+% to just get to 100%. Now, this individual happened to be the top performing person at 80%. Nonetheless, it was still below the target threshold. So
no matter what, and you said something that was really powerful, which was, it was an attitude thing.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, that's infectious to everyone else. And sometimes the highest performer, and this is why I think of it as the crop, and again, seed versus soil, because if you have one bad seed, it can infect the plants. There's different things in the rest of the crop. So it's you as the farmer, you as the leader have to look at it holistically, because that's taking away from everyone else. And if, why is that guy not getting to, it creates a culture of almost like favoritism, I would think is what I'm hearing in that scenario. So it sounds like the right decision was made, because you're focused on an attitude issue, and nothing cures a bad attitude, right?
And you're 100% right. In those scenarios, we're looking at what's the impact to the rest of the team. Now think about this. You're a brand new VP. You come on in, you're meeting with the whole sales organization. You say, hey, everybody, I want to do one-on-ones with everyone. Can you join me here on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Like, what days work best for you? And you got one person that is, by the way, the top performer, but I'll be at 20% underneath performance goals, right? Who's like, no, not doing that.
You're just the best of the worst?
Yeah, you're the best of the worst, bro. You don't have a leg to stand on. You don't have a pot to piss in, as they say, right?
You're not hitting your numbers. It's as simple as that.
So, for that was a very clear win. And it was, this is not about who is bigger, taller, stronger. This was about reasonableness. And that's where I look at with an individual was the ask reasonable? Of course it is. I'm the new kid on the block. I want to know what's going on. I want to talk to you, get to know the team members, right? Shoot the breeze. That's happens with you build rapport face to face, which is why I really like the idea of building rapport face to face, or at a minimum, at least you're seeing someone through a virtual environment like this.
Yes, you're spot on.
So let's tease out the idea between, how do you know that you have a seed problem, which is a person, versus a soil problem, which could be process, systems, tools, technology, bad marketing leads, any of those types of things. How does a leader know that?
Oh, that is such a wise question. And I think if somebody had the answer every time on what that is, they would sell the entire world, right? And then they would have everybody would be a customer. So here's the probability, in my opinion. It is always both. I used to think it was one or the other. I have skewed with my experience that it is more a soil problem than a seed problem. But let me start with the seed problem. It was to a T what you shared. You literally were talking about attitude. But if somebody has a great attitude, then the next thing you do is look at what are the skills they have? Are they coachable? Do they want to be great? Now, there are certain skills that everybody has. This is why I'm leaning more now these, like, again, later in my career, to what can I do to fix the soil? And here's why. I am a believer that all people have strengths, all people have talents, all people have skills. It is up to the farmer or the leader to align the skills that a seller has with the processes and the needs of the soil or the company, so to speak. That's the first thing. So rarely is it actually, I'm finding more and more that there's a talent issue. It's actually a misalignment issue. What does that mean? I'll share with you something I'm seeing as a trend in the marketplace that totally makes sense, but I want to share with you how this can show up at times. I'm seeing more and more, and that a lot of companies are talking about full cycle AEs. There's only 3 things you do in sales, right? What are the 3 things? You create pipe, you advance pipe, you close pipe. That's it. As a seller, there's a lot of skills that you need in all of those, but especially in enterprise sales, most sellers who have graduated up the chain and are in enterprise sales, they've been a while, get really, really good at one of those, usually 2 of those. The one that usually starts to drop is the create pipeline, which is why you have SDRs, you have all these things. And why is that? Because sales cycles are longer, and imagine someone having to do the whole thing in a 900-day sales cycle, right? And continues to it becomes almost unrealistic, right? So why do I bring this up? Because if you have a process, if you have an infrastructure that requires a seller that has 2 of the 3 skills, but your process requires all 3, it's a misalignment issue. Now, here's the thing. Is it easier to find, and this is why I go back to thinking through, why would the best sellers want to come to wherever you're at? So is it easier to switch out the sellers, or is it easier to figure out your process and your infrastructure and figure out, how do I align my soil around the right type of seed that's out there? Every company is different. So it takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of deep diving to figure which one is the majority of the problem. So I usually tend to look at, hey, process, infrastructure, sales plays, product market fit. Is when you ask the question, you rattle off like 10 things on the soil side and only 1 thing on the seed side. So it kind of tells you usually where there's more issues. But that's just, again, maybe an opinion of one, and that a lot of people share, maybe nobody shares, but that's just my personal experience.
So let's vet out the seed side, right? You've got mindset.
Yep.
Ability or capabilities.
Yep.
And I think they were different. Ability and capabilities. I think they're different, but one and the same. What do you think?
So I'll actually give you my management philosophy when I think about, when I look at a seller. I have a different leadership philosophy than a management philosophy. They're 2 very different, but there's 3 things I look at when I manage a seller. I look at potential, I look at capability. So I actually put capability or ability in the same bucket. So I mean skills. So you got potential, capability, and then I think of effort, right? So are they putting in the effort? So under effort, I think of character. It's a character thing, which is attitude, all the things that you were talking about with your story, right? Do you have a good attitude? Are you willing to try? Are you coachable? All those things, right? In skills, that is something that if you put in all the effort, this is something where I call it nurture. Potential is that nature, like you either have it or you don't, right? And this is why as a leader, this is the hardest thing. So if you have all 3 of those things, that's typically your top 1% sellers. They have a bit of naturalness to them, and they will work their butt off to have all the skills possible. If you have the effort, and I see that personally speaking, and then you're willing to continue to get better and better, this is my personal opinion on myself. I say this all the time. I actually don't think I have a high aptitude for nature. I am one of the hardest workers, and I'll give that about myself, that I will figure it out, and I will work to the bone. So I have a high work ethic and I have a high level of skill. But I do that because sometimes I feel like insecure, like I don't have enough of the natural talent. And so you've got to think about all three of those, but that's just the way that I define, and I start to like look at the seed, right? Which of those three are lacking?
Okay, now let's go to the soil. Break down the soil for me. What could be included inside there as a sales leader when you're, looking to build or grow or explode?
Yeah. So there's a lot of it when it comes to the data aspect. The things that I typically look at is, historical evidence of what it takes to win a deal. So you think about, I'll give some interesting ways to look at a win cycle. So if you think about segmentation, if you think about industries, you think about how many days it takes to win an opportunity, most people look at those things. What I tend to start looking at is how many opportunities did it take to win the first win in a segment, in an industry. So if it took you 5 losses on average in an industry at a certain segmentation to get the 6th win, like the 6th time is a charm, I actually look at all of those cycles, put it together. That could be one thing that you got to look at. I think about marketing. I think about leads. I think about how are we generating intent signals? Like we hear about it more and more in the enterprise, right? You see all the stats that Gartner puts out, Challenger puts out, like 60 to 75% of the buying cycle, a customer is through and they've almost to their decision before they even contact a seller. So marketing's playing more and more of a role. This is something I'm really passionate about, is that if we want to attract the best sellers, how are we investing back in them? Do we have a sales, does a company have a sales academy? What does their investment in their training and career growth look like? That's all part of the soil, because think about it, you got to water, you got to fertilize, you got to invest in order to get an ROI off your people. So you think about culture, that's part of it too. You think about segmentation of those processes that I told you about, create pipeline, advanced pipeline, close pipeline, all of that comes into the soil. And what are you expecting a seller to do? So there's so much to this, but we could go on and on and on, but those are just a few of the, components that just pop up off the top of my head as you ask that question.
Okay. And taking the seed or the soil side, how do you fix some of the challenges or problems that you're seeing? I don't care which one you want to take, whether it's seed or soil. Take them both.
Yeah. I usually would rather start with the soil, believe it or not, right? I would think through, if I were to build, a finance plan, if I were to build anything, I would go through all of these metrics, see where our core skills, where core wins, where do we have a toehold, a foothold, and just market dominance. And I would really build around that, right? So when I'm trying to fix something and I'm looking at flat, I'm looking at growth, I'm looking at everything else. And in today's marketplace, I would be heavily, heavily, heavily focused on product market fit and awareness. Like I love what we talked about earlier about how you, even what you do in your business about driving demand, right? Like I would be figuring out every single possible way to drive demand. I remember, everybody knows this now maybe, but when I was building my company back in 2007, 2008, one of the things that a mentor told me at that point, it was just for small business, right? Always have minimum 8. I don't know why that was the magic number, minimum 8 lead sources at any given time. That's probably one of the biggest things that I focused on that helped me be successful, because even if you can't do attribution to one or two of those lead sources, you don't know how that's impacting the other three. It reminds me of what you just said about the team. One thing affects the other in terms of seller. And so all of them working together, the more you have, lines in the water, so to speak, that's one of the biggest areas that I would focus on, especially in today's economy, right? You need everybody talking about you.
I like the way what you said earlier, though, actually, and that's start with the soil, because I think generally speaking, most people, the seed, if you would, most people want to do good. Most people want to excel. Most people want to be happy. Most people want to be acknowledged for their good efforts. And so if you start with the soil, you could perhaps change the seed. And I think of it in the idea, I've got my yard, and my wife and I, back in October of 2022, I think it was October 2022. We decided to take our entire yard and transform it into a complete herbal garden, and herbs and fruits and vegetables. And we planted over 66 different fruit vines, trees, herbs, vegetables, etc. And we have plenty of space in our yard, so we just like made it happen. And as I look at some of the items, you're like, oh, these are kind of brown. These aren't performing well. Well, if you just put a little bit of fertilizer inside the soil, guess what happens? Right? Oh shoot, my fig tree, I almost cut her out. Almost took her out. Well, it was year 5 after I put it into the ground. By the way, it was in a pot for like 4 years, and then put her into the ground. And I call it a herb because they bear fruit, and so I think of plants as females. Don't be offended if you want to call it a him. Fine, call it a him. But I put the fig tree into the ground, and it took 5 years. On that 5th year, I said, if you don't produce, I'm taking you out and having it a new fruit tree. Now, the reason why I said that was because this fig tree came from my childhood home that my mom had taken a, oh my God, what do we call it? A branch off of, cut the branch, put it into water, then put it into soil. And then they sold the house. So she handed off like eight of these, pots. And I took one of them. And so it had sentimental value, right? After my parents sold the house off. But I told it, year 5, I'm cutting you out. And guess what happened year 5? Boom, it started producing all the figs, right? And so what did I fail to realize? It wasn't a soil problem. It wasn't a seed problem. It was just it needed time to mature. And so sometimes we see that where things just need time. And perhaps the business is willing to invest, and there are other circumstances where you need immediate results, and the business can't wait for someone to mature, and that you do have to change out the seed. But it's not because the seed is the problem. It's because the business wasn't in a position to be able to let the seed blossom and grow in its due time, right?
Yeah. Man, that is such a powerful, I feel like there's a parable in there somewhere. But what's really interesting about, I think about the bamboo as well, right? They talk about that. That's another one where you have to wait and all of a sudden it shoots up over time. But this is why understanding, and this is the secret of all of this, right? We haven't talked a lot about this, is really the farmer. You have to have the farmer that understands how to fertilize, how to look at that, how to tend. And this is a lot of times where leaders just haven't been trained in that area. It could be that, or you have different, like, again, we'll call it a fig tree. if it's a farmer or a planter or whatever, that's used to, doing different types of crop. But what's really fascinating about what you're saying about the time, and really the time and money, like when you're thinking about getting through a season, is that's where we think about like the business itself, the product market fit, all of that matters so intently. But remember how I was saying, being able to dig and look, for example, an enterprise deal. What if you're in a company where where was I at? Oh, it was the Gartner Sales Conference in Vegas earlier this year. I talked to a gentleman that was in, forgot the exact industry. It was just like the industrial glue. And like, it was just some like completely different industry. And he was talking about the way their engineers have to think and their sellers have to think. And sometimes their deal cycles, maybe it wasn't glue, it was some sort of industrial whatever, but 5-year deal cycle. That's the average, 5 years. And if you don't understand that, and you don't understand that about your business, it's like the old Einstein quote. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to spend its whole life thinking it's insane, right? Or stupid. And at the end of the day, you have to know what you have, because you can't judge that fish. Like, you got to change out the soil or put the fish in water, right? It's the same sort of analogy. And I do think that it's more effective, but sometimes it feels easier to just change out the seed, because you go down to the grocery store, change out the seed. Oh, why isn't this working? But to till the soil, to fertilize it, that's a lot of work to do. So just interesting to see how impactful it can be, though.
Well, who would have known that we would have spent 45, 50 minutes talking about seed and soil inside of a sales context? But we're coming up on time here, man, and it's been obviously great to have you on the show. It's great to have you and your insights and some of the things that we should be thinking about as sales leaders for those listening in. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way? Is it through email, through Twitter or X, LinkedIn? What's the best way, Stephen?
Yeah, honestly, it's LinkedIn. Probably LinkedIn. Shoot me a connection request. Shoot me a message, but be very specific, right? What's the ask? All that sort of thing. I get a ton of requests, but if it's generic, I don't typically answer. But usually LinkedIn is the best way.
So if you're looking for Stephen, you heard me say Stephen, but it's actually spelled as Stephen. So it spells like Stephen, but it's Stephen and Oommen, OOMMEN. So OOMMEN. Look him up on LinkedIn, and please make sure when you reach out to Stephen, you say, I heard you on the Modern Selling podcast, so that he knows specifically why you're reaching out and that you heard him along with Mario Martinez. Bro, I have one last question for you, and that is your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Well, I got to tell you, just by looking at my background, everyone should know it has something to do with sports, but it's Love and Basketball.
Love and Basketball. I assume it's based on a true story?
I believe, actually, I don't know. That's a really good question. I've never been asked that. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if I know the movie. I'm horrible with names of people and names of artists, names of, but when I see something, I'll remember it. So I'm gonna have to look that one up. Love and Basketball. My boys love basketball. They're so into that. And for all of you listening in right now, hey, don't turn that dial quite yet. I got this very important message for you right now. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a 5-star rating and a review on iTunes. Oh, and don't forget, if you'd like to save 20 hours or more in a month and increase your productivity, go right now and download Fly Message, that's flymsg.io, for free. It's your free text expander and personal writing assistant. Hey, thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.